it's just not built into everyone to just figure it out.
You're built to hunt the answer, whereas
Yes.
other people are built to be spoon-fed the answer.
Yeah.
Your eyes are limited to a one-octave band of vision.
Profmed Future Professional. Shared values, one future.
This is Rapelang Rabana. She's one of the smartest people I know, not just in South Africa, but on the continent. I'm going to big it up that hard. Because ultimately, she's been involved in startups since she was at university. She created a mobile competitor to Skype, which was her first exit, I believe, unless she was selling lemonade stands and lemonades and that kind of stuff as your stereotypical entrepreneur. But Rapelang's gone into the incredible things. She's created education businesses. She's done fintech. And most recently, she's been on the cover of Forbes magazine, just with some of her developments.
Wasn't so recent. I'm getting old now.
Well, I'd never be able to tell. But Rapelang is the founder of Reignite Learning. We're also going to talk about fast forward innovation, because there's a lot of cool work that you're doing there from an apps perspective, design, development, builds, management consultancy. Like you've got the full suite of things.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about why not every person should be an entrepreneur. That's quite a controversial one for today. But we're going to dive straight into
We
it.
sure can. We
Rapelang,
sure can.
why should not everyone be an entrepreneur?
Sure. There's so many answers to this question, but for me, it starts with, it's not this idealized thing that is the ultimate end goal for everyone. I think that life has always been about picking a struggle. You're either picking the struggle of, I want to build and do stuff that I think is important and I will tolerate, the unpredictable cash flow and wherever it takes me, or you're picking the struggle of, I want to navigate a large corporate and get to the top of that, and I want that kind of influence and power, or I want to build an NGO that is going to, do stuff. But it's all about picking a struggle, and whatever you pick is going to be a struggle. There's no easy way through life. There's no simpler way. And a lot of the time when people think I want to be an entrepreneur, it's because they think it's an out from corporate or an out from a job. But it's just a different kind of struggle. And you should be able to understand yourself well enough to actually figure out which struggle you want to do and you're suited to do. I did my one corporate stint at corporate for 1 year, first time since university. And I knew for sure then, and what I knew when I was 22, that it's not the struggle I want to fight.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating one because the more social media proliferates our lives, the more voyeurism we have and the more keeping up with the Joneses that we actually have in all of our daily lives and channels. And some of our entrepreneur friends may make it seem glamorous because, speaking from both your and my experience, is that we have to put on the perception that things are going swimmingly always. We don't post about the negativity because who's going to want to back you? Who's going to want to fund you with VC, venture capital, if you're a negative person?
Exactly. It's a catch-22, right? Because I'm really for being authentic. I'm really for walking within your truth and living to your highest values and stuff. And that's why I'm so pretty weak at social media, because I just don't know how to play that game and I just not investing the energy into it. But at the same time, the entrepreneurs who may not be doing, real businesses but have that game tapped are, getting that limelight or attention and whatever support. And it's a tricky one because you don't want to ever look like you're less successful, because then a client will be like, oh, but are you still going to be around next year? Oh, is your business viable? So it's always a tough balance for me.
And it's similar with professionals. If you think about the last 12, 14, 16 months, how intense that focus has been on our frontline workers, not just in South Africa, but around the globe, how they've been impacted by daily loss of life, by people getting close to the brink, and how absolutely exhausted they've been from running multiple shifts. Like, you don't always see the reality of that. You don't always see doctors coming onto Facebook when they've got a 1 day off saying, oh wow, that is a terrible week, we lost some lives. It's more the celebration of the positives. And even in those professional spaces, so even if our FAs who are listening to this are dealing with certain individuals, like the positivity that's reflected online is not always the reflection. And You speak about inward reflection.
Yes.
There's a lot of inward struggles happening right now in people who are C-suite, who are in corporate, who are professional, and those who are entrepreneurial. Like everyone, exactly to your point, has their own personal demon and struggle.
Correct. And I've been to, Davos in World Economic Forum annual meeting, and it's there 3,000 of supposedly the most successful people in the world, and I assure you they all have struggles.
Okay, well,
it never ends.
Let's take a little divergent course because I love the WF conversation because here's another different hat that you wore. Are you still involved in World Economic Forum? Are you still what is your role there? And give us a little bit of a.
So I'm not employed, but the World Economic Forum is really one of those multilateral organizations. It's got lots of networks and communities. So I started in the Global Shapers community, which was really, really fun. It's young leaders below the age of 30, and you run your own hub. So I was in the Cape Town hub, and we did some awesome projects. We planted a whole line of trees in Riebeek West. It's a beautiful road now, thanks to that. We did entrepreneurship training workshops. We did horticultural training for prisoners in one of the prisons in the Western Cape. We built or launched a platform for volunteers to be able to track their effort and time and the skills they learned, so that young people who are trying to get a job can enhance their CV by showing the things that they volunteered for. It was probably the most impactful time, and lots of hard work. And then I got too old to stick around, as it happens. And I was selected as a young global leader a couple of years ago, which is the older people network.
It's like the masters. You're now the masters of World Economic Foruming.
Exactly. And that's cool in its own ways. It's very different community, but you get a lot of these executive education things where you get to go to Harvard or the Chinese universities or Yale, etc. And obviously access to the big regional events and Davos, which is, I really like those events mainly because it allows me to zoom out of my ordinary day life in the hustle and just lift my head and see what's happening out there, what people are smoking and what people think is cool. Because, I forget those things because I'm so much deep in the hustle.
What I like about your approach to business is that you're able to take a whole bunch of topics, a whole bunch of interests, but then you're also able to distill that information and take out those like succinct nuggets and those bite-sized pieces of information. And I think that carries through into Rekindle Learning. So I think let's go in that direction now.
Sure.
So from a Rekindle Learning perspective, like the way that I understand it is that you plug into various corporates or C-suite teams and they've got an internal comms need or problem to solve, right? We know you've got thousands of employees, you've got disparate information, you've got thousands of COVID requirements and HR policies. So how do you drill that down into the most bite-sized, almost in a tweet or in a WhatsApp kind of solution, right?
Yeah.
And that's effectively what you do. So tell me about the problems that you're solving for corporates with your bite-sized information takeouts.
Sure. Are you sure you don't want a job at Rekindle Learning?
Marketing manager, coming in hot.
Would be great if you came through. So yes, the problem I wanted to solve for isn't so much, there's lots of MOOCs out there. There's the Coursera's, there's the Udemis and all of that.
Tell people listening what a MOOC is. You're going to start sprouting jargon.
It's a massive open online course.
Cool.
Basically, it was the initial hype around e-learning that you could go and do your whole MBA online at a Harvard, etc., etc.
Yes, Coursera, Udemy, it's anything where you can almost online learn and digest lots of information and either pay for it or have a free version of it.
Exactly. Most of it is free. If you want a certificate, you generally pay for it and stuff. And we're not seeing that great success. The throughput rates of the MOOCs is sitting at less than 12% of people that actually start. And a lot of it, I think, is designing digital learning, started from a place where you just put stuff online. It wasn't really changing the learning experience, how much quicker it is to learn. Do you reduce the time to competency, which is what, helped us focus in on the business problem there, because a lot of companies are much worse than the MOOCs. They send memos, long emails with the critical organizational knowledge that they're hoping people will understand about their strategy, their new products, their customer service approach.
Click delete.
Yeah, exactly. Or they send you, a manual that's gets printed and sits on your desk for those who still go in the office, etc.
Cobwebs.
Or they put you on one of those online things with lots of slides and there's a quiz at the end and everyone just skims through,
click,
and tries to just get through the quiz. So we just looked at that situation. It's like, it shouldn't be this horrible, and it's supposed to actually make life easier for you. And a lot of the challenge is that it's still very passive and static engagement with it. And we realize people enjoy the bite-sized stuff. We see that from social media, etc. And we see that people like the interactive part, which is why they go straight into the quizzes and try to skip as much of the reading as they can. So we sort of then said, let's flip this model, and rather let's focus the content on short videos that people would actually watch. And the rest of the content, let's skip the passive reading. Make every important principle or insight or business rule, etc., into an interactive question. And it's not just a quiz that you pass or fail. You know, the app tracks what you're getting wrong and right and brings you back to the stuff you're getting wrong, gives you the corrective explanation so that you're now in a position to fix whatever misconception you had and demonstrate that now you understand. And it's all about that competency-based learning, as opposed to, I went to the orientation, I clocked an hour, I'm sorted, let me sign, with no real, insight or transparency for the company in terms of who understands what. And, in mining environments with safety stuff, it's crucial. Everyone will admit that they've signed those yellow or pink forms that they make them sign, but truly they don't remember what's in there. Or in financial services, there's so much happening around banks and other entities becoming fully fledged financial services institutions. That means whole new product sets. It means a whole sort of regulations that they have to master now. And with one of our banking clients, for example, there's a big thing now around phase, which is one of the regulations that financial advisors need to be able to sell or render financial services, essentially. And we managed to improve their pass rates so that they have more accredited staff by 30%, just by taking those slides that they were doing in those 2-day, 3-day workshops and actually packaging it into an interactive micro-learning course. And, that takes a huge headache of someone, because now they're eligible to stay in their job and get promoted. And people that were failing, got through. It could also be in sales. So like call center agents, for example, that we've worked with, a lot of the time, they've got to sell new products every other month or something. They've got to figure out what this product is about, etc. And we did a project with a client where one group just did the 2-hour workshop. The other group had the workshop and the micro-learning app. And the group that had the app had a 20% higher sales conversion rate. And it's not complicated content. These are the features, the benefits, the clients it suits, when we want to do what as an organization, our approach, etc. And I think it's because they had that familiarity with what they were doing, they were more confident in that sales approach. So every company has a huge base of organizational knowledge they need to disseminate. And now that we're remote, distributed, it becomes even more critical to be able to do that consistently, so that, the Western Cape isn't outperforming Gauteng all the time. Yes. And vice versa.
2 comments. You spend a lot of time in various markets across the continent. You're not just focused on South Africa. So one thing that I'm interested in is South Africa's challenge with critical learning and asking critical questions.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's a huge problem within that space. The other comment is just around the challenge of middle management. And I feel like there's a lot of people with a dearth of information and insight and knowledge. They may have been in a company for a long time, but then that knowledge skill and it's not being transferred or shared to middle management, and sometimes people are being accelerated from junior positions into the middle without the support, the empathy, etc. that goes with it. So how do we solve the critical skills challenge, and how do we solve the middle management aspect, and how do we become a stronger workforce? Just both body and mind, right?
Big questions. Do you want me to be president and try to sort them out?
Let's go critical thinking first.
Sure. So the critical thinking, right? What we often miss with learning, because we come from a school system that was very one-directional, passive learning and tests, is that we forgot there's actually multiple modalities or forms of learning. Yes, there's the reading and the knowledge intake, but there's the experimental experimental. There's the experiential learning where you actually going out into the world and doing what you're learning. And there's the, learning from others' experiences. There's so many forms of ways of learning. And you actually, to develop those higher cognitive skills, you needed to do more modes of learning, which is why stuff like project-based learning is becoming, bigger and bigger. So we would need to change our metrics of success in school. Right now, you're clocked for doing a test as opposed to efforts or exploring X and Y, learning a new thing. And it needs a serious overhaul. The other big thing with critical thinking is that I'm more worried about the creativity element than the critical thinking. In highly analytical education system that we have, we are taught to filter a lot of stuff and decide what's good or bad. We do a lot of judgment training in our education as it is. It's more the ability to go wide and open and explore beyond what will work or think will work, before you go critical thinking and narrowing down to what you're going to execute. So I would invest a lot more effort on the creativity side.
I had such an interesting question from my 4-year-old the other day. She came home from school and it started pretty simply. Dad, what's the opposite of big? Small. Yes. What's the opposite of, dark? Light, all that kind of stuff. Then when she moved on to, Dad, what's the opposite of green?
Yes.
I was like, what?
Yes.
And it was like absolutely stumped me.
Yeah.
And I think that's the great thing about kids, right? Is they look at the world in a completely different way. So I had to come up with a creative answer to solve and appease her insight. So when I said, let me think about this. Okay. Well, the opposite of green is red. She's like, why, Dad? And I said, well, because green means go and red means stop. And she just turned to me and said, good.
Wow.
So then, we kind of had to continue this line of questioning for an entire 2-hour drive to some city, and until she was she was satisfied with my question. And she started throwing things like purple at me, and it really started bending my brain in the way where you're like, this is why people talk about the importance of kids learning based on how they like to play, because they'll be stimulated by the things that actually interest them. So I think that's a huge comment within there around our education system as a whole and the grassroots structure of that. It's problematic.
And I mean, there's lots of research showing that kids' creativity levels are at genius levels before the age of 5-7, and it continues to decline dramatically until they're 18, precisely because she's not constrained to think in the binary form that we are male, female, or whatever the other opposites she came up with. She could suppose that green has an opposite.
And tell me, when you are briefed, you're speaking to various levels and various scales. And, we spoke earlier offline in terms of the sprints that you do to help do experimental work, or you're testing a hypothesis, or you're doing A/B tests, or whatever it may be. So what is the general kind of problem that a business has that might be different between sizes, whether it be entrepreneurship or a more professional-led business or a kind of behemoth of a corporate? Are there similarities of requests that come through to you to be solved from an education need, or are there differences based on the scale and the actual, whether it is blue-collar solve for mines versus white-collar solve for a professional institution?
There's definitely a variety of education needs. So what we're experimenting with at the moment, for example, is for technicians or students that are, studying medicine but can't get into the labs now because of COVID, etc., is to supplement the theoretical learning with VR or virtual reality experiential learning. And we're finding that's becoming more and more important for any, physical hands-on work or blue-collar work a lot. Whereas in the, white-collar professional space, the kind of experiential learning we're needing to create there is quite different. So for those, learning digital skills, like learning how to do cloud and what's, it's more important that as they're learning the principles of stuff and the cloud, they should be able to spin out an AWS environment or etc.
Tell
to
the
be
people,
able to
what's AWS?
Amazon Web Services, basically one of the cloud providers, whether it's Google Cloud or IBM Cloud, etc. And to be able to do that while they're doing the theory is critical to actually understand. So it's still about theory and practical, but it comes in different forms depending on, the kind of industry and work you're in. So they are similar, but implemented differently, I would say, if
Very
that
nice.
makes sense.
So hypothetically, we live in a world where your offering becomes redundant, which is terrible for your business and terrible for you as a startup. But
which offering?
your education offering at Rekindle Learning perspective.
In terms of
like corporate education and knowledge sharing and building education solves for business.
Yes,
right?
okay, sure.
If you were to be made redundant in your offering,
Yes.
what would need to happen within businesses to empower, enlighten, educate their staff in much better ways? I mean, it's quite a big one.
Yeah, I think the main way we would have to become redundant is that the schooling system generates people that can teach themselves, learn and relearn. Then they don't have to be supported in their learning because they can figure it all out themselves. And that's still a while to go, I think. I think entrepreneurs are very good at it. Certainly, I taught myself everything in my 20s, but it's not a thing that everyone does. I mean, my boyfriend will still ask me, how do you do that? I'm like, what did Google say? Like, it's out there, and it's just not built into everyone to just figure it out.
You're built to hunt the answer, whereas
Yes.
other people are built to be spoon-fed the answer. And I think it's like it's hunter gathering for the digital age.
Exactly.
Rapelang, I love speaking to you so much because there's always like a new way that you make me look at things, and also
That's
the
good.
perspective in which you almost approach a problem that needs to be solved. So tell our listeners, our viewers,
Yes.
tell them where they can find you. I mean, you hate
Sure.
social media, so you're
I'm
very
there.
difficult. Yeah,
I'm
you've
there.
got the presence,
I'm there.
but what's the best way? Is it a website?
LinkedIn is where I'll be most of the time. So please follow me there. And my website is rapelang.com. So
it's a great one.
I got in early.
It just
I
shows
got
your
in
early adopter status. Eh?
I bought it a very long time ago. That's where you'll see a lot of conversations I'll have, not just in the learning space, but, within Fast Forward Innovation, it's also around how do you help organizations innovate faster. So for people that aren't, entrepreneurs per se, but are keen on innovation and technology and stuff, we will often, be in a company where we're doing those collaborative design sprints so that they can test out these new ideas, revamp the customer experience, journey by figuring out how they can share information, change their processes, or upskill their teams in different ways. And it's always great in those environments because we force them to work in a different way. It's cross-collaborative, across functions, across hierarchies. So we find, a call center agent sitting next to their C-suite, and they've just never had that interaction before. And the kinds of ideas that can come out and the synthesis that can come out when you've got that kind of group of people together is really awesome. And ultimately getting them to speak to the customer early. Most people are terrified to speak to their customers early on in the ideation process. And in those 4 days, most people say they've done months and months of work in those 4 days.
I think that's the reality. It's like we need to encourage and we need to uplift people to be able to ask more questions. That's how you start your journey. It's curiosity. That's the journey to critical thinking. That's the journey to going out and hunting your own solves, whether it may start as a simple Google search or ask your customer. Rapelang, always a pleasure. Cool. Lovely chatting to you. And it's been a fantastic
Good
day
to
with
see
you.
you, Mike.
Profmed Future Professional. Shared values, one future.